With the release of Star Wars Rogue One upon us, I thought what better time could it be to take a look at the original Atari Star Wars arcade games. I'm Ito, and this is Strictly Arcade. Released in the summer of 1983, around the same time Return of the Jedi hit theaters, Atari brought Star Wars to the arcades. The game came in two different variations, a stand-up unit as well as a sit-down environmental cab. The game used color vector graphics to give a 3D perspective to the game, which at the time was a marvel to look at, and arguably still is to this day. Players control Luke in his X-Wing fighter during the final moments of the original Star Wars film. The game is broken into three different levels. The first is a dogfight level, where you make your way through the Death Star while fighting hordes of TIE fighters. In addition to the fighters, Darth Vader's TIE Fighter Advance also appears in the game. The second level has you battling the defenses of the Death Star, while also trying to avoid crashing into its turrets. The final stage takes players to the Death Star trenches as you shoot wall turrets and dodge various obstacles on your way to the target to destroy the Death Star. As you beat these levels, they will recycle each time, becoming more difficult by adding additional fighters, projectiles, turrets, and obstacles. Players from the get-go can choose what difficulty they want to start on. This feature, in addition to the increased difficulty of recycled levels, would be carried over to the sequels of the game as well. Starting on easy gives players a bare bones experience, featuring only 2 of the 3 levels. Also carried over to the game's sequels was the very unique yoke-based controls with trigger buttons, giving players a precise analog experience. The game's audio features short renditions of popular Star Wars music and some pretty classic digitized voices.
Yahoo! You're all player, kid!
This game became a staple in the arcades, and is a highly desired arcade game even to this day. Atari followed Star Wars with the release of their Return of the Jedi game a year later in 1984. I'm still not sure why they didn't go in the order of the movies, but oh well. Atari changed things graphically a bit with this one, and moved away from the vector graphics to more traditional ones. Playing at a 3/4 isometric view, players battle through 3 core stages. Controls remain the same as the previous games, and the machine was primarily released as a stand-up unit in the US. However, there was apparently an environmental unit released in the UK. First, players would take control of a speeder bike, ramming and shooting scout troopers on their bikes while trying to navigate through the terrain to avoid crashing. The second stage puts players inside an AT-ST walker as you avoid dangerous terrain and shoot down enemies. This level introduces the game's split mode. Every few seconds it intercuts with a level where you are piloting the Millennium Falcon on the way to the Death Star and need to destroy incoming enemies. This is followed by a third level where you make the Death Star run to destroy the core while avoiding obstacles and shooting enemies. This game, while today highly collectible, was not as popular as its predecessors. The game can be said to be rather difficult, especially when it comes to dodging obstacles in the speeder bike. Some pretty cool concept art that was discovered revealed that a version of the machine with speeder bike controls and decor was being thought of, and even a full sit-down version was as well. In 1985, Atari released Empire Strikes Back as a conversion-only kit, meaning no dedicated cabinet was ever made. Arcade owners would have to retrofit their previous Star Wars arcade game to have the game. This game went back to the vector graphics looks of the original, and feels more like a true successor to the original. There are 4 stages in the game, the first being the destruction of probe droids on Hoth. The second level of the game has players destroying AT-ST and AT-AT walkers. The third level of the game has players flying the Millennium Falcon in outer space, while also trying to destroy TIEs. The fourth level is simply an asteroid avoidance level in the Falcon. One unique feature that was added to the game was the Jedi bonus. Each level had timed goals that if met, players would get bonus points and a letter to spell Jedi. Overall to me, there seems to be a lot more on the screen at once in the game. The difficulty seems a little bit harder than the original Star Wars game, but it's more of a fun difficulty challenge, unlike Atari's Jedi game. In my opinion, it stands neck and neck with the original arcade game. Well, that wraps up this episode of Strictly Arcade. I do want to point out there were a number of Star Wars arcade games produced by other companies, and maybe in the future we'll take a look at those. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time.